All right, quick video on the install of Speedway part number 9193. No, scratch that. 910-31931. It is a universal weld-on disc brake kit, and I've preached for years that it's the cheapest way to add disc brakes to literally pretty much anything made going down the road. And I cannot find anything about it whatsoever. Speedway doesn't talk about it. There's no videos on YouTube, so I'm gonna make a quick video about this. I used it because there was not an aftermarket kit available for my housing ends. I got a video on the housing ends that I just put up too. These are strange ends for a drum brake that take a 9-inch axle bearing, but they're for an 8/8 drum brake, a 9-inch drum. And the way the back of the end is made, there's no way to bolt a caliper bracket to that, which is how all the aftermarket stuff is designed. And then on the, I can't find anything that incorporates a bracket that would bolt to the front side and retain the axle at the same time. So just gonna do a quick walkthrough on what it took to get this done. Obviously, first thing that needs to happen is you need to jerk the drum off, jerk the axle out, pull the backing plate off, and then you need to, I cut up the backing plate and use it as a spacer because something needs to take up that distance. The bearing sticks out of the housing end about 1/8 of an inch, and to get the correct preload to retain the bearing, if you didn't put your backing plate back on there, then it's going to be too tight. So I use that as a spacer. You could also probably just whittle out a spacer out of a piece of sheet metal. I don't know what that is. It's probably 90,000, something like that. 0.95. But so anyways, get that knocked out. Put your axle back in. I put the brake hat on with 3 bolts, which that's a second thing. If you got aftermarket axles, it's probably not going to work. The paperwork says that the OD of the axle has to be 5.75, which I found was not quite correct. My axle was about 6 1/4. And we cut a good chamfer. This is not my axle I use, but cut a good chamfer, cut that corner off, and kind of used 2 angles, and almost made that into a great big radius. And then I ended up at probably 6/100 or so, and it went ahead and fit down in the drum. But you need to make sure that the drum is not retaining or preventing you from sliding the hat all the way onto the axle. You need to make sure that you can slam that down tight and there's not a gap between here. And they also say to check your knurl. Like if you're using a stock axle, you may have some knurl sticking out through the axle flange, and you need to make sure that that's not holding up the drum as well. But once you get that on there, like I say, put a couple nuts on it, hold that tight like it's going to be when it's going down the road. Put your bolts in. Should have done that before. Your bolts go in your brake hat. They only go one way. You can't put a nut on this side. It's too close to the hat. So they just go one way. And then I put the pads in there. And it was mentioned in one of the reviews on these kits to take, there's a rattle clip that goes on this pad right here. And he said if you leave that clip in there, you can't take the caliper off once everything's welded in place. And after messing with it, I think he was right. So I took it out based off his recommendation, and I think it was the correct thing to do. I went ahead and drilled out there was a squealer right here too that was riveted on. I drilled it out just to eliminate any other possible problems. But I think that was good advice that I saw on Speedway's page. But anyways, you bolt your bracket to your caliper with the included bolts, and you need to leave just a little bit of room between your bracket and the caliper. Stick it on there, and then I went ahead and put air in the line to clamp the caliper tight on the rotor, and you can see the piston sticking out quite a bit there. That gives you a better starting point of where it's going to be whenever it's actually together and going down the road. And then position your caliper bracket where you have just a little bit of gap, so you got some wiggle room with that clamp down. And then on this particular axle, these are designed for 3-inch axles, and mine was like 2.800 or something like that, and I had a pretty good gap there. And the bolts were sitting on the rotor, so the slider bolts were. So I went ahead and put a shim in there. I found the highest point of the rotor because these do have just a little bit of run out because it's a cheap kit and just a stamped hat. But I found the highest point of the rotor, put that where the caliper was going to be, and then I put just a 40,000 steel shim in there to give myself just a little bit more wiggle room for run out down the road before I welded anything. But like I said, get all that on there, charge it with some air, and it ain't going nowhere at that point. And this caliper bracket does not care where it's at as long as your bleeder's on top. I try to get it at least level, and I think this kit is really designed to let me grab my light. I think it is designed to have this bracket level with the world, and I'm at about 7 degrees, and my bleeder's still about level, but if you had that on down level, your bleeder would be uphill all the way out to the end, and I think that would be ideal. But you can put them behind the axle, in front of the axle, wherever, as long as you get the things bled. And I guess you could put them literally anywhere if you wanted to bleed it, if you wanted to pull the caliper off to bleed it and get your bleeder pointed up. But anyways, got that clamped on there, and then weld it. I would do it in short spurts and try not to let it get too hot to keep from moving the rear end around very much, because it will warp the rear end if you don't have a jig. Or, I mean, this ideally would have been done before you weld your ends on, but that wasn't the case. But I just tried to weld 1 inch or so at a time, let it cool down, weld an inch, let it cool down, and then. So after that, you need to locate somewhere where your hoses will attach and let the caliper move freely and let you get the caliper off. And then they include tabs here in these clips. And these are a 3/16 brake line to probably -4 AN adapter fitting. But they include the bracket, the fitting, and the clip, and the line comes with it also. But that's the gist of it. I did figure out in the process of this, if you're trying to rough this stuff in, like maybe before you have purchased the kit and you're wanting to see if it's going to work or whatever, let me grab my light again. The leading edge of this bracket is going to be approximately 1.5 inches from the housing flange. And that was on, I guess I should say this, that was in my particular case, and I have a 2.5 inch break offset, which the break offset is the face of the axle flange. Well, okay, face of the axle flange that the hat sits against, to the face of the housing end that the backing plate sits against. So, in other words, the face of your axle to the inside of this bracket is going to be right at 4 inches. That's a measurement you're not going to find anywhere, or I couldn't find it anywhere. But that gives you a better idea ahead of time when you're just looking at stuff to get an idea how stuff's going to sit, what it's going to interfere with, etc., etc. Make sure it is going to work. But it seems like a pretty good kit to just slap disc brakes on about anything. And anyways, if you got any questions, just ask. I just was hoping maybe this could help somebody else out down the road, because it seems like nobody even knows about this kit. So it's been around for years and years. $250, and it's $250 for the metric kit. They've got a cheaper kit, which I think is like $220, $230, that has the older GM calipers, but the metric kit's supposed to be about, I think, 7 pounds lighter overall than the standard GM calipers. So always looking to save weight. For $30, 7 pounds is pretty cheap. I think that's the majority of it. All I was gonna say is, this is just generic GM. I think G-body stuff like Monte Carlo, 80s Monte Carlo, Regal, Cutlass, etc., etc. Front calipers. So they should be pretty easily available from a local parts store, or if you have a problem on the road or something, you should be able to find parts for it. But the kit comes with the bracket, the caliper, the slider bolts, the hat, the rotor. I don't know if I said brake hose, the tab, and the clip. One last thing that I have kind of already noticed with it after getting it bled, I'm not having much of a pedal, and I think I'm going to have to go to put a small residual valve, probably a 2-pound residual valve in the back brakes to get it to work correctly. Which, if you're going from drums to disc, you need to make sure you don't have a heavier residual valve in there anyways, or that's going to create problems by itself. So if your drums, which a lot of drums do have an 8 to 10 pound residual, so you'll probably need to get that out, and then you may end up having to put a couple pounds back on it. I think that's going to straighten mine out. I'm not positive, but anyways, like I said, if you all have any questions, just ask, and I hope this helps you out.